I've never 3D printed a model. I've never owned a 3D printed model. And to be honest, I'd never really wanted to 3D print a model until I stumbled across one little Instagram account called Mezgike. I saw his kind of nautical, almost Bioshock themed Nurgle models, and I fell absolutely in love. Now, funnily enough, I'd been talking to a friend of mine who has gotten into 3D printing, and he and I had been talking about having him print me some models to work on and play with. But as soon as I saw these models, I sent him some pictures. He knew all about them already. We went and bought some STLs, and the rest is history. I now have an entire army of these guys to paint. Now, before getting into how I tackled painting this DredgeNaught, I wanted to let you guys know that this video is sponsored by Only Games. They've given me an affiliate link as well as a discount code for 15% off, which will be in the description below. So if you guys want to pick up any of the Dredge models or any of Mezgike's other sculpts, you can head to the link in the description and support me in doing so. Just try and tell me that these aren't the coolest deep sea themed miniatures you've ever seen. Although maybe they're not really your style, and that's fine, because maybe you need a really big angry green boy to lead the rest of your slightly smaller angry green boys. Have you ever seen a cooler angry green boy than Bug Bonehead the Beast Hunter boss? I don't think so. So head to the link in the description and use code PaintByAz15 for 15% off. Check out these badass models and support Mezgike and myself in doing so. So I wanted to work on this model because this was the one that caught my attention first. It was this badass looking Bioshock Big Daddy Chaos DredgeNaught thing. So I used this as a test model and filmed the entire process. So here's that. So even though these guys are, I guess, kind of on the Nurgle theme of things, I wanted to go for more of a nautical theme, obviously, because that's the theme of the miniatures sculpts themselves. So I stayed towards grays, but I started painting the model by priming it black and then spraying it with a dark brown, and this is because I'm using AK Interactive's chipping fluid. Now the way this works is you paint or spray this over your color, let that dry for about an hour, and then work on the colors on top of that. For this I used multiple blue grays, basically just painting in a zenithal style, working from darkest to lightest, kind of creating those volumes and shadows underneath. Then after giving that paint about an hour to dry, I was able to use the magic of this chipping fluid. Now all I had to do was go in with a very wet brush and kind of just soak the entire model a little bit, and this is going to reactivate the chipping fluid underneath the paint. Once it was sufficiently wet, I used a kind of coarse brush to flake away the grey paint underneath. Once doing this, because there is a little bit of residue from the water, as well as some paint that's been pulled up, I just dabbed off the model and let him dry. Then once it had dried, I just gloss varnished the model to seal it in and protect that paint job underneath for the next steps. Now on to our next little piece of weathering magic. This is Streak and Grime. So this is an enamel paint that we can paint right over that gloss varnish. This won't soak into the paint because of the gloss varnish. That's why we've wanted to protect the paint. But I painted this just over all of the model. Once the Streak and Grime has dried, I douse it in artist grade white spirit and just use a trash brush to agitate it all and get a reasonable bulk of the Streak and Grime off. Then I go in with a makeup sponge that I've soaked in that same white spirit and clean the raised areas to create a cleaner surface at the top, leaving the grime in those recesses. Once that's dry, this is what it kind of looks like. It looks kind of cool because it's glossy, so I guess it makes it look a little bit wet, which does fit the theme. But I went ahead and sprayed the model with a matte varnish to lock that in so as I can paint over it. And then did something that isn't really necessary, but I like doing. It's kind of like visually mapping out the rest of the model to do by blacking out everything that's not that armor panel that we've just finished. I went in and did a little bit of extra detail, so just with a brush, I painted on small little streaks of Streak and Grime and then feathered it out with that same thinner. Now I went ahead and highlighted all of the armor panel. Now I didn't do a straight edge highlight. I wanted to keep to that rough theme, so I actually used quite an old crappy brush and loaded it up with some very bright gray and kind of tapped on little chip highlights around all of the edges of the armor. I then moved on to the metallics. So I base coated the silver with Vallejo Metal Colors Gunmetal Gray. If you don't have Vallejo Metal Color metallics, do yourself a favor and pick some up. They're actually meant for an airbrush, but they flow really, really well and very opaquely off a brush. And they are by far the best metallics I've ever used. At the same time, I base coated all of the kind of copper with decayed metal from scale 75. This is because the next step, I wash the model with a 1:1:1 mix of Agrax Earthshade. It's actually a dip paint that I can't get anymore, but it's a black dip paint, and then I thin that down with some flow improver. I then wanted to give these a go. I haven't really used these products a lot. They're from Dirty Down, so the Rust and Verdigris. I painted the Rust on all of the silver metallics and the Verdigris on the copper. The copper worked a little bit better. I don't think I shook the paint enough to really get the effect that I was after, but they still came out looking cool. Because the Rust didn't quite work for me, again, because I think I just didn't shake it enough, I reverted back to a tried and true technique of just using some pigments. So I brushed on some rust colored pigment and then locked it in with some isopropyl alcohol from a brush. Once that had dried, I just gave both a quick dry brush of a brighter metallic color. And then it was time to tackle the next big bulky part of the model. So I wanted to do all of the skin. I wanted to make it look kind of like a, I guess, seaweed monster, I guess you could call it. I used an olive green mixed with a little bit of black just to darken it and desaturate it a bit and base coated it. And then gradually added more and more of a very bright opaque green. I think I used a Scorpina green from Vallejo Game Color and just added rough kind of sketched layers on smaller, more raised edges as I did layers. I think I ended up doing about 10 layers. Once I was happy enough with that, I felt free to move on to some smaller details. So I did all the little barnacles. I just added some magenta to that same base olive green that I had on my palette and base coated all of the barnacles, and then went through and did another 50-50 with magenta and then straight magenta over the top of that. I then went around the model and painted all of the wealth of details like the coral, the starfish, and some of the horns on it. I then moved on to what I wanted to be the next kind of focal point of the model, which was the bright glowing eyes. So I started by base coating the eyes with a dark red, and then I filled in the plasma coil and eyes with white ink. I use ink because it's very opaque and it flows very easily off the brush. I then edge highlighted the top of the coils with a dark red. I guess it's not really highlighting, but I just wanted to darken them up. And then with an airbrush, I added a kind of glowy halo with that same white ink. I then did multiple thin layers with a red fluorescent paint. I'm using Vallejo Game Colors fluoro paints, the new ones. Once I reached a level of opacity I was happy with, I went back in with a brush and added into kind of the inside parts some more white ink so I can do the same again and add a new level of intensity. I went around and also edge highlighted some of the surrounding OSL areas with white at this stage. Onto round 2 of airbrushing fluorescent red. This will create kind of a bridge between the original layer that's now going to be a bit more darker and opaque, and a new brighter layer on top. You can kind of see that in the eyes. I went and picked out the top of the coils with a dark red and then a black, and then I called it done. This was a really fun project. I'm extremely happy with how it came out. I mean, I don't even really have to say it. It kind of speaks volumes for itself, but the model is just so cool, so fun to paint. Plenty of details and super unique. If you do want to pick this model up, I have an affiliate link with Only Games. That's in the description. So if you pick that up, I'll get a little bit of a kickback from the sale, and you can get yourself, at no extra cost, these badass models. I want to say thank you for sticking around to the end of the video, and I will see you guys in the next one.